Your feet are trying to tell you something, and most people don't listen until it's too late. Not because they're careless, because the signs are quiet, because they look exactly like other things: tiredness, bad shoes, getting older. Because nobody ever sat them down and said, "This is what it looks like when your body is losing a war you didn't know you were fighting." That's what I'm going to do today. My name is Dr. Rachel Okonkwo. I'm a podiatric physician and diabetic foot specialist with 22 years of practice. I've treated over 6,000 patients with diabetic foot complications, from the earliest warning signs all the way to the operating room. And I want to tell you about a man named Gerald. Gerald was 58 years old, a retired high school basketball coach. He came into my clinic with what he called a blister that wouldn't go away. He'd had it for 3 weeks. He figured it was from his new walking shoes. He almost didn't come in at all. That blister was the first visible sign of diabetes he'd had. But it wasn't the first sign his body had sent him. His feet had been sending signals for 2 years. He just didn't know what they meant. Gerald lost 2 toes on his left foot. He kept everything else, because he came in when he did. 6 months later, and the story would have been different. I think about Gerald a lot. I think about the 2 years of signals his body sent that nobody caught. And that's why I started making these videos. According to the American Diabetes Association, over 37 million Americans currently have diabetes. Another 96 million have prediabetes, and roughly 80% of them don't know it. The Centers for Disease Control calls it a silent epidemic. And the feet, these 2 things we walk on every single day and almost never look at, are often the very first place the body raises its hand. So let's talk about what to look for. Not in a clinical, abstract way, but in a your body, your life, tonight kind of way. The first sign is one almost everyone dismisses: tingling. A mild, almost pleasant pins and needles sensation, usually in the toes, sometimes spreading across the ball of the foot. Most people blame it on sitting with their legs crossed, on bad circulation from a long flight, on getting older. But here's what's actually happening when blood sugar stays elevated too long. The glucose begins to coat the tiny nerve fibers in your feet like frost on a windshield. The medical term is peripheral neuropathy. And the tingling, that annoying little buzz you feel in your toes, is the nerve trying to fire correctly through damage it's already sustained. I always describe it to patients this way. Imagine an electrical cable with the rubber coating starting to crack. The wire inside still works, for now. But the signal gets noisy, distorted. And if you don't address the cracking insulation, eventually the wire goes silent. The tingling is the noise before the silence. Research published in the journal Diabetes Care found that peripheral neuropathy affects up to 50% of people with diabetes. And in many patients, it begins years before a formal diagnosis. If you feel that buzzing in your toes, especially at night when you're still and there's nothing left to distract you, pay attention. Don't explain it away. What I'm about to describe next is so easy to miss that most people live with it for years without connecting it to anything serious. Numbness. Not tingling, numbness. The difference matters. Tingling is the nerve sending a distress signal. Numbness is the nerve going quiet. When blood sugar damages the peripheral nervous system over time, sensation in the feet can fade so gradually that you don't notice it happening. You step on something sharp and feel almost nothing. You bump your toe on the corner of the bed frame, and there's a dull thud instead of sharp pain. You touch the bottom of your foot, and it feels like you're touching it through a thin rubber glove. This is where I need you to really listen. Pain is your body's warning system. It's how your foot tells you, something is wrong here, fix it. When that system goes offline, small injuries become catastrophic ones. Not because the injury was severe, but because you never knew it happened. Gerald's blister? He hadn't felt it form. He found it when he took his sock off one evening. By then it was infected. The CDC reports that diabetic neuropathy is a contributing factor in over 80% of all diabetes-related amputations. Over 100,000 amputations a year in the United States alone. Almost all of them started with a small wound someone decided to wait on, or never felt at all. Let that sit for a moment. If you've noticed a loss of sensation in your feet, even mild, even occasional, That is not something to put off. And it connects directly to something almost nobody talks about until I bring it up in my office. Temperature sensitivity. Specifically, your feet feeling either unusually cold or unusually warm compared to the rest of your body. Cold feet that never seem to warm up even under blankets. Or the opposite, a warmth, sometimes a burning, in the soles that feels like standing on pavement in August. In January. Both of these can signal the same root problem. The autonomic nerves that regulate blood flow and temperature in the extremities are being disrupted. When blood sugar is chronically high, it doesn't just damage the sensory nerves, it damages the autonomic ones too. The ones that run the background systems. The ones you never consciously control. Think of it like a building's HVAC system going haywire. The thermostat is sending signals, but the controls aren't responding correctly. So some rooms are freezing and some are sweltering, with no good reason for either. The burning version of this symptom tends to be worst at night. Not during the day when you're moving and your mind is occupied. At night, when you slide into bed, the house is quiet, and you become suddenly, acutely aware of this heat radiating from the bottom of your feet that has no cause you can name. If you've ever kicked the blankets off your feet in the middle of winter because they were too warm, you know exactly what I mean. I want to pause for a second and ask you something directly. Any of these first three, the tingling, the numbness, the temperature changes, do any of them sound familiar? Not necessarily dramatic, just familiar. A quiet version of something you've brushed off. If yes, type yes in the comments below. You'd be surprised how many people watch a video like this and realize they've been carrying something for months without naming it. And sometimes, being seen is the first step to doing something about it. Now here's where it starts to get more serious. Foot swelling. Edema, particularly in the feet and lower ankles, can have many causes. But when it appears alongside other signs on this list, it becomes something worth examining very carefully. In diabetes, swelling in the feet can signal that the kidneys are beginning to struggle. The kidneys are responsible for filtering fluid from the bloodstream. When blood sugar remains high over a long period, it damages the small vessels in the kidney, a condition called diabetic nephropathy. The kidneys become less efficient at removing excess fluid. That fluid accumulates, and it sinks because gravity into the feet and ankles. I always explain it to patients like a drainage system backing up in a house. The pipes are narrowing. They're still working mostly, but water is starting to pool where it shouldn't. The National Kidney Foundation reports that 1 in 3 adults with diabetes will develop kidney disease. Foot swelling that appears without an obvious cause. No long flight, no injury, no extended time on your feet. Deserves a real conversation with your doctor. Notice the swelling. Notice when it happens. Notice which situations make it worse. This next one surprises people every time I bring it up. Slow healing wounds. A cut, a scrape, a small blister. In a healthy body, these close up in a matter of days. In a body where blood sugar is chronically elevated, the healing process is fundamentally impaired. Here's why. When you sustain an injury, your body deploys a complex cascade of responses. Immune cells rush to the site, blood vessels dilate to deliver oxygen and nutrients, new tissue begins to form. High blood sugar disrupts every stage of this process. It thickens the blood, making it harder to circulate. It weakens the immune cells, making infection harder to fight. It damages the blood vessels that deliver the repair materials. The analogy I use in my office. Imagine trying to construct a building when the supply trucks keep getting stuck in traffic, the workers are underpowered, and the materials arrive damaged. The building goes up, eventually, but slowly and poorly. A wound on a foot that hasn't healed in 2 weeks is not a wound to ignore. This is the sign that Gerald came to see me about. And as I told you, he almost didn't come. Pay very close attention to what I'm about to describe, because this one carries risk that most people don't fully understand. Changes in skin color on the feet and lower legs. Specifically, a reddish, brownish, or dark discoloration, often appearing in patches. Sometimes a yellowing of the skin. Sometimes areas that look bruised with no injury to explain them. These discolorations are often the result of diabetic dermopathy, small changes in the skin's blood vessels that cause pigmentation shifts. They are sometimes dismissed as age spots or bruising. They are rarely painful. but they are a visible signal that the vascular system in the extremities is being affected. The blood vessels are narrowing, circulation is declining. And when circulation declines in the feet, combined with neuropathy, you get the conditions that allow small injuries to spiral into serious ones without the body's ability to respond. The skin is an organ. When that organ is changing in ways it shouldn't, the body is asking you to listen. And here's what makes the next sign so insidious. Dry, cracked skin, especially on the heels. Deep cracks in the heel skin that don't respond to moisturizer. Skin that feels rough, thick, almost leathery in places. The autonomic neuropathy I mentioned earlier doesn't just affect temperature. It also damages the nerves that signal the sweat glands in the feet. The feet stop sweating normally. Without that natural moisture, the skin dries. It thickens. It cracks. Those cracks are not cosmetic. They are open wounds. In a foot with compromised circulation and reduced sensation, a cracked heel is an entry point for infection in a place that struggles to heal and can't always feel the damage happening. I have never seen this listed in a patient brochure, but I have seen it become the starting point for serious complications more times than I can count. Check your heels. Specifically, not just a quick glance, actually look. This next one is the one I wish more people asked me about. Changes in foot shape. A slow, progressive change in the way the foot looks, a collapsing arch, a toe that's beginning to curl or drift, a prominence on the side of the foot that wasn't there before. One of the more severe but under-recognized complications of diabetic neuropathy is a condition called Charcot foot, sometimes called Charcot arthropathy. When sensation in the foot is severely reduced, a person can fracture the small bones in their foot without knowing it. They continue to walk on the fracture. The bones shift. The foot begins to deform. The foot can take on what's sometimes described as a rocker bottom shape, rounded, collapsed through the arch. By the time many patients notice something looks different, significant structural damage has already occurred. Think of it like the foundation of a house developing cracks while the family inside just goes about their day. No pain alarms, no visible warning on the surface, just a slow, silent shift underneath. If your foot looks different than it did a few years ago, and you haven't had an injury that explains it, that is worth a professional evaluation. And now, the sign I want you to hold on to after this video is over. Foot ulcers. Open sores, most commonly on the ball of the foot or the bottom of the big toe, that form, persist, and don't close. Diabetic foot ulcers are the culmination of everything I've described today. The neuropathy that means the person didn't feel the pressure building. The poor circulation that means the tissue breaks down instead of healing. The compromised immune response that means infection takes hold quickly. The dry, cracked, thickened skin that's already under stress. According to the American Diabetes Association, approximately 15% of people with diabetes will develop a foot ulcer at some point in their lifetime. Of those, 6% will be hospitalized due to infection or complications. And foot ulcers are the leading precursor to lower limb amputation in patients with diabetes. The infection spreads. The wound won't close. And in the worst cases, the leg doesn't survive. Remember Gerald, the man I told you about at the very start? This is the sign he almost missed. One blister, 3 weeks unattended, that had already begun to track toward infection by the time he came to see me. He was lucky. Not everyone is. What I want you to feel right now is not panic. Panic doesn't serve you. What I want you to feel is clarity. Because everything I've described, the tingling, the numbness, the swelling, the slow healing, the skin changes, the shape of your foot, all of it is detectable. All of it is something a doctor can assess. And caught early enough, all of it is something you can act on before the story changes. If you're watching this and you've recognized something, a symptom that felt too familiar, a sign you've been quietly explaining away, I am asking you to make an appointment this week, not next month, this week. And if someone came to mind while you were watching, a parent, a partner, a friend who's mentioned something that sounded like one of these signs, tag them, share this. You might be handing them something they didn't know they needed. The feet are not where diabetes lives, but they are often where it speaks first. And the question is not whether your body is trying to tell you something. The question is whether you're ready to listen.